He risked his career to protect a kidnapped girl. Watch what he did. Welcome to our channel, where every story holds a special place. We're so glad you're here with us today. If you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting story. Stay tuned for another incredible tale coming your way tomorrow. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thank you for being a part of our community. Now, let's dive into today's story. Staff Sergeant James Carter stood perfectly still, his posture impeccable as the sun shone brightly over Buckingham Palace. The hum of excited tourists filled the air, their cameras flashing as they admired the historic grandeur of the royal residence. The courtyard was alive with the hustle and bustle of a busy summer day in London, but Carter, true to his training, remained motionless, as always, with his attention trained on the sea of people around him. The soft chimes of the cathedral, bells echoed in the distance marking the hour. While many guards focused solely on their duty, Carter had developed a skill beyond the usual military training, the ability to read crowds with subtle shifts in focus. His military service had taught him that awareness was a matter of life and death, whether on the battlefield or standing guard at the palace. Carter knew that survival depended on understanding the world around him, on picking up the tiny cues that others might miss. Amid the crowd of onlookers, Carter's sharp eyes were drawn to a pair of small eyes that didn't seem curious or awed by the spectacle in front of her, as most children were. Instead, the young girl, no older than 8 years, seemed filled with something else, something far more unsettling: fear. Her small frame was hunched as if she was trying to shrink into the ground, trying desperately not to be noticed. Unlike the other children, who excitedly pointed at the guards in their bright uniforms, the girl stood, motionless. She seemed to want to disappear, her face hidden behind a veil of dark hair. Though it was a sweltering summer day, with the heat causing most tourists to wear light summer clothes, the girl was dressed in long sleeves, her entire body covered. The contrast was jarring. She looked out of place, as though she were trying to shield herself from the world around her. The man beside her, an imposing figure dressed in expensive clothes, seemed to take little notice of her discomfort. He gripped her shoulder firmly, his hand pressing down on her with a force that seemed deliberate, as if to keep her in check. Carter's sharp eyes caught the way the girl flinched under his touch, her body tensing in response to every subtle shift of his hand. The man's smile was forced, practiced. When he noticed Carter's gaze, he gave a brief nod and said, "She's shy around strangers," his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. But Carter, trained to read the smallest of signals, wasn't convinced. Something about the way the girl held herself, her reluctance to meet anyone's gaze, her tense posture, told a different story. As the man turned his attention to his phone, the girl's shoulders relaxed slightly, but only for a moment. Her relief was fleeting, replaced once again by that all-too-familiar stiffness under his watchful gaze. Carter's thoughts drifted to his own daughters, Emma and Charlotte. He thought of their laughter, their boundless trust in him, and it pained him to see this little girl in such distress. Her silence, her unwillingness to speak, were troubling signs. They weren't the natural behavior of a shy child, but of someone who had been taught to remain invisible. Carter's instincts, honed by years of experience in high-stress situations, screamed that something was wrong. As the day wore on, Carter's concerns deepened. He watched the girl closely, noticing the way she tracked the man's every movement, never straying too far from him. When a family with laughing children passed by, she gazed at them with longing but quickly looked down when the man squeezed her arm, signaling her to behave. Carter saw the small, silent interactions, how the girl flinched whenever the man adjusted his grip, the bruising marks that flashed briefly as his sleeve rode up. These were the subtle signs of a child who had learned to survive by being invisible, by controlling her fear to avoid triggering her captor. Carter's military training kicked into high gear. He recognized these signs, having received counter-trafficking training just months earlier. This girl wasn't just shy. she was in trouble. The more Carter observed, the more he understood that the distress signals were clear. Her fear, her compliance, her every move spoke of someone who had been subjected to trauma, not strict parenting. She was a child trapped, and Carter knew that he had to do something. But what could he do? He was a royal guard, bound by tradition and protocol. His duty was to remain motionless, to never break formation. Yet, as he watched the girl, he realized that some things mattered more than protocol. Some things mattered more than tradition. And that was when Carter made his decision. As the ceremony continued, Carter's concern for the little girl deepened. He observed the way she flinched under the man's touch, the way her eyes darted around but never met anyone's gaze. There was something unsettling about her silence, something that didn't sit right. She wasn't just a shy child, she was a child being controlled, a child who had learned to remain invisible, to disappear in plain sight. It wasn't a natural shyness. It was the kind of fear that could only come from sustained trauma. The man beside her, whose hand never left her shoulder, seemed too calm, too rehearsed in his actions. He smiled politely at the tourists who admired the guards but kept a tight grip on the girl, as though he feared she might escape. His fingers dug into her shoulder whenever she moved too much, a subtle but firm reminder that she wasn't allowed to stray. The more Carter watched, the more certain he became that something was terribly wrong. He knew the signs. The bruising on her wrist was impossible to ignore. It was faint, but unmistakable. The pattern of adult fingers gripping too tightly left an imprint that could not be mistaken for anything else. It wasn't just strict discipline. It was control. It was ownership. The girl's body language, her stiff posture, the way she flinched, at every touch told Carter everything he needed to know. This wasn't just a child acting shy. This was a child in fear, in pain, trying desperately to keep herself safe. When the crowd surged forward, the man lifted the girl to get a better view, but as he did, Carter saw it. Her sleeve rode up for just a moment, revealing more bruises in various stages of healing. The marks were fresh, some still purple and raw. Carter's stomach churned. The man's smooth demeanor, his practiced smile couldn't hide the fact that something sinister was happening right before his eyes. Carter's mind raced. He had been trained for this. His military background, his time spent in conflict zones, had prepared him for moments like this. He had seen trauma before. He had witnessed the far-reaching effects of abuse, of human suffering. But this was different. This was a child right in front of him, a child who was trying to send a signal, a child who had learned that survival meant silence, that to speak out was to risk further harm. And then it happened. Carter caught the smallest movement, so small, so subtle that anyone else might have missed it. But not Carter. He had learned to notice the tiniest details, the flicker of an eye, the slight shift in posture. The girl's right hand, still held tightly by the man, twitched. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was a signal, a universal distress signal taught to children in situations like this. A simple hand gesture, a silent plea for help. The girl's fist closed, then opened, then pressed against her opposite palm, just as she had been taught. Carter's heart skipped a beat. His instincts kicked in. He knew exactly what this meant. This was a cry for help, a silent scream that only those trained to recognize it would understand. His training had taught him that when a child makes this signal, something is desperately wrong. For a moment, Carter hesitated. He was a royal guard. His duty was to remain at his post, to follow protocol without exception. But in that moment, as he watched the girl's silent plea, the weight of his training collided with something deeper, a sense of duty to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. He couldn't ignore it. He couldn't turn a blind eye. Carter's gaze met the girl's for just an instant. Her eyes, wide with fear, locked onto his. In that fleeting moment, he saw everything. The fear, the pain, the silent desperation. Her eyes spoke what her mouth couldn't say. It was a cry for help that cut through him, past all the rules, past all the training. It was the kind of look that changed everything. The man, noticing the interaction, quickly pulled the girl closer, positioning himself between her and Carter, trying to shield her from view. His grip tightened, his face twisted with anger, but Carter didn't look away. He didn't break his gaze. He knew what he had to do. The decision was made in an instant. Carter's pulse quickened as the man's grip on the girl tightened, pulling her closer to him as if to shield her from anyone's gaze. He had seen enough. The bruises, the unnatural silence, the distress signal. It all pointed to one undeniable truth. This child was in danger. For a moment, Carter's military training, the years of disciplined control, the rigidity of his role as a royal guard, fought against his instincts. His training had drilled into him that breaking formation was forbidden, a breach of the sacred traditions that had defined the royal guard for centuries. His every movement, every breath, was supposed to be a testament to unwavering discipline, to stoicism in the face of anything, even the most extreme provocations. But this wasn't a typical situation. The girl's fear was palpable, her distress unmistakable. Carter's heart clenched as he recalled his own daughters, Emma and Charlotte, and the trust they had in him. He thought of how he would move mountains to protect them if they were ever in harm's way. The same instinct he had in combat, the same protective rage that had driven him to shield others in the heat of battle, now burned through him. He had to act. There was a moment of hesitation, just a split second. But in that instant, his mind made the decision for him. Carter couldn't stand idly by, trapped by tradition, while a child suffered right before his eyes. His instincts told him that if he didn't act now, it might be too late. He could already see the panic in the girl's eyes, the desperate plea for someone, anyone, to notice her suffering. Carter's boots cracked against the stone courtyard, the sound of breaking formation echoing in the air. His feet moved before he had time to second-guess himself, propelled by the urgency to reach the girl. The tourists around him gasped as they saw the unthinkable, a royal guard breaking protocol, stepping out of position. The man noticed Carter's movement instantly. His face twisted in rage, and his grip on the girl tightened even further. But Carter didn't flinch. He marched toward them with the full authority of his training, his voice booming as he commanded, "Release the child immediately." The man hesitated, his eyes flicking around the crowd, calculating his options. He seemed to believe that his presence, his position, his polite demeanor would be enough to protect him. But Carter wasn't fooled. His eyes locked onto the girl's, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. She didn't say a word, but her wide eyes communicated everything. She was afraid, she was trapped, and she had no way out. "I said, release her," Carter repeated, his voice low, deadly serious. The man's posture faltered for a moment, but his defiance quickly returned. "This is none of your business," he hissed, his voice filled with venom. "She's my niece, we have a schedule, you're making a mistake." But Carter wasn't fooled. His military mind processed everything in mere seconds. The bruising on the girl's wrist, her response to the name Sophie, the way the man's hand never left her shoulder, the sickening possessiveness in his tone. Carter knew exactly what he was dealing with. Security approached, sensing the tension in the air. But Carter was already positioning himself between the man and the exit, blocking the path. He stood tall, his presence commanding, his resolve unshakable. The elderly couple who had been observing from the sidelines stepped forward, their concern now evident. "She's frightened," the woman said gently, her voice filled with concern as she turned to the girl. "Sophie, are you okay?" The man immediately interjected, his voice sharp. "She's shy. We're in a hurry. This is ridiculous." But his voice faltered when the woman mentioned the girl's backpack. "The name tag looks turned in. Shouldn't it say Sophie?" A flicker of panic crossed the man's face. He pulled the girl closer, but Carter was already moving. He had heard enough. The pieces were falling into place, and it was clear what needed to be done. "Let go of her," Carter demanded, his voice hardening. "You're not leaving until I get some answers." The man's demeanor shifted from smooth and controlled to something far darker. He tried to twist away, attempting to push past Carter, but the tension in the air was thick. Carter could feel it, the balance of power shifting, and he knew the man was trying to find an opening, an escape. but Carter was already one step ahead. In that brief moment, the girl's eyes met his once again. Her silent plea cut through him like a blade. It was as if she knew the danger was real, as if she could sense that her survival depended on someone seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time. And in that moment, Staff Sergeant James Carter made his decision. He wasn't just a soldier, standing guard. He was a protector, and this child needed him. Breaking the chain of protocol would have consequences, but Carter understood that some choices were more important than duty. He had to act. Carter stood his ground, eyes locked on the man, his military instincts kicking into overdrive. He had stepped out of position, and there was no turning back now. The tension was palpable, the kind of stillness that only comes before a storm. The man, now visibly panicked, tried to backpedal, pulling the girl closer to him as though she were a shield. His grip on her tightened, and his eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but Carter wasn't going to let that happen. "This isn't your business," the man hissed, his voice a mix of fury and desperation. He attempted to shove past Carter, but the Royal Guard wasn't moving. The man's mask of politeness had slipped entirely, replaced by a cold, calculating hostility. Carter's voice was firm and unwavering. "I said release her. Now!" The crowd, sensing the rising tension, began to murmur. Some tourists had already pulled out their phones, recording the unexpected scene. Carter could feel their eyes on him. But all that mattered right now was the girl in front of him. She was still silent, her body stiff, her eyes wide with fear. But there was something else there too, something that Carter couldn't ignore. A flicker of hope. She had seen someone care. She had seen someone stand up for her. The man's face twisted in rage, and he took a step back, trying to move the girl away from Carter's reach. But Carter was too fast. He closed the distance, positioning himself between the man and the exit, making sure the girl was protected. The man's hand had loosened slightly, but not enough to make a difference. Carter could see the hesitation in his posture, the slight crack in his armor. He wasn't going to let this man get away. Security was closing in, but Carter had already decided. He didn't need to wait for backup. He knew the girl's life was in immediate danger. He had seen enough. His military training and instinct told him what needed to be done. Carter raised his voice, projecting authority that was impossible to ignore. "Let the child go. Now." The man froze, his eyes flicking from Carter to the security guards who were approaching rapidly. The air was thick with tension, but Carter remained calm, his hand resting on the hilt of his ceremonial sword. He had never broken protocol before, but this situation was far beyond protocol. This was a matter of life and death. He could see the sweat on the man's brow, the shift in his posture. He knew he was losing control. "I don't know who you think you are," the man growled, trying to regain his composure. "But you're making a huge mistake." Carter didn't flinch. His eyes didn't leave the girl, who was still standing frozen, her small form shaking slightly. Her eyes met his once again, and in that fleeting moment, he saw the plea for help. In them more clearly than ever before. This was no longer just about duty. It was about saving a life. Carter's gaze turned hard, and he stepped forward, pushing the man back just enough to break his hold on the girl's arm. "You're not leaving here with her," Carter said, his voice low and dangerous. The man tried to pull away, but Carter wasn't backing down. He could feel the weight of his decision, the danger in the air, but he was resolute. "I'm taking her to safety," Carter continued, his eyes burning with intensity. "And you're not going anywhere." The man's face contorted in rage, but before he could respond, Carter's voice rang out again, filled with authority. "Release the girl now." The man, realizing his power was slipping, gave a low, angry growl, but finally released his grip on the girl's arm. It was a small victory, but it was enough to break the tension that had been building up. The girl's eyes welled with tears, her breath shaky, but there was a flicker of relief behind her fear. Carter immediately stepped in front of her, shielding her from the man. Security finally reached them, and the other guards closed in to surround the pair, blocking the man's exit. He could see the fear in the man's eyes, the realization that his time had run out. "Do you know who I am?" the man snarled. "I'll make sure you regret this." But Carter didn't flinch. He had heard threats like that before, in battle, in conflict zones. But this was different. This was about protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves. The girl's safety came first, and that was all that mattered now. The security. Guards quickly restrained the man, pulling him away from Carter and the girl. The man's struggle was futile, and as he was led away, Carter remained with the girl, his eyes softening as he looked at her. She wasn't just a victim, she was a survivor. And in that moment, Carter knew he had done the right thing. As the security team swarmed around the man, Carter's grip tightened on the ceremonial sword hilt, though he never let go of his focus on the girl. She stood there, trembling but now visibly free from the man's grip, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. Carter could see the struggle inside her. She wasn't sure who to trust. She had learned through sheer survival that people could betray her, could hurt her. And yet here she was, now facing a stranger who had broken all the rules for her. His chest tightened with emotion, but he kept his face stoic, his guard unwavering. This was the kind of decision that defined him, not just as a soldier, but as a protector. The man was still snarling, his defiance clear, even as security officers restrained him. "You don't know who I am," he hissed. His voice was raw, filled with the venom of someone desperate to maintain control. But Carter didn't flinch. He had seen too many faces like this before. Men who thought their power, their position could protect them. But power, Carter knew, meant nothing when it came to protecting innocent lives. As the guards hauled the man away, the girl's eyes flickered to Carter's, locking with his for a brief but powerful moment. It was as though she was processing what had just happened, still unsure if this was all real. Her hand, still trembling, lifted slightly, and Carter took a knee, lowering himself to her level. He needed to make sure she knew she was safe, that he was here for her now. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, though his voice still carried the weight of authority. The girl didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked down, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. It was as if she were debating whether to speak, whether she could trust her voice to carry the weight of what had just happened. The elderly couple, who had stepped forward earlier to help, were now standing nearby, their expressions filled with concern. They had witnessed everything. They had seen the man's aggressive behavior and the girl's fearful silence. The woman approached Carter and placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice low. "Thank you," she whispered. "We were watching. We saw everything. You saved her." Carter gave a small nod, his eyes never leaving the girl. He needed to make sure she felt safe, that she could trust him. She had been through enough. The police had arrived now, their sirens still echoing in the background. The scene, once bustling with tourists, had turned into something else entirely. The man, now handcuffed and barely resisting, was being escorted to a waiting police car. Carter watched him closely, his military instincts still alert to any sudden movements. The man had tried to flee, but Carter had closed that door the moment he broke formation. It had been a gamble that could have cost him everything, but in the end, it had been the right choice. But there was no time to reflect now. Carter had to focus on the girl. He stood, carefully moving aside as the female officer approached the girl, speaking softly, asking her for her name. The girl's gaze flickered to Carter again before she spoke, her voice a hushed whisper. "Lily Bennett," she said, her words barely audible. Carter's heart broke for her in that moment. This child had been through something no one, especially a young girl, should ever experience. The officer nodded and gently guided her toward the medical team who had arrived to examine her. Carter wanted to follow, to make sure Lily was okay, but he knew that his role here was to step back and let the authorities handle the rest. The girl was no longer in immediate danger, and that was the most important thing. As he watched the medics carefully assess Lily, the weight of the situation finally began to hit him. The man had been more than just a controlling guardian. He had been a predator A predator who had been on the move for weeks, kidnapping children using the same tactics to avoid detection. Carter had just interrupted a nightmare in the making, and though the consequences of his actions were still unknown, he knew he had done the right thing. The elderly couple moved toward him again, their faces filled with gratitude. "Thank you." "Again," the man said, his voice shaky. "We've been watching her for a while now, and we knew something wasn't right. If you hadn't acted, I don't think we would have been able to save her." Carter gave them a brief nod. "It was the right thing to do. I couldn't stand by and let her go through anymore." As Lily was led to a waiting police car, her parents arrived, rushing to her side. The moment they laid eyes on her, the floodgates opened. Her mother knelt down, pulling Lily into her arms, holding her tightly, as if she were afraid to let her go. Carter stood at a distance, giving them their space but watching with a quiet satisfaction. He had saved her. Against all odds, he had saved her. And that, Carter realized, was worth every risk, every broken rule. We'd love to hear from you. What do you think of this incredible story? Staff Sergeant Carter's decision to break protocol and step in to save a child's life is truly something that touches the heart. It's a reminder of how one person's actions can make all the difference in the world, even when faced with the toughest decisions. But we want to know, what would you have done in his shoes? Would you have risked everything to save someone in need? Or would you have followed the rules, even if it meant letting someone suffer? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment where you had to stand up for what's right, no matter the consequences? Whether big or small, your stories matter. Let's talk about it. Your voice is important, and we want to create a space where we can learn from each other's experiences. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories like this. We've got much more coming your way, so hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. We can't wait to hear what you think.